If somebody came to me and said that India will be doing 50% of the world's digital transactions today, I would have said, no, I wish it is true. It's in the realm of possibility, but I don't think it will happen.
Joining me in this conversation today is Sharad Sharma.
You know, Indians are more conditioned to VUCA. What's the full form?
The co-founder of iSPIRT.
You need both a Ran Bhumi and a Rang Bhumi to be the best version of yourself. What we model for them will matter more. Amongst our Uber drivers, the fastest learners are Indians.
One of the most powerful system thinkers in India today.
We are in a broken system, which is going to become worse. I think we have to start by changing the definition of friendship. I think the cancer in our society, which prevents all this from happening, and I'm going to get beaten up for saying that. Adversity can kill you or it can make you strong. The people who then work on the inner world will thrive more in the outer world. All this mythology around happiness itself is broken. If you create an overly safe environment, then that friction is not taking place. You won't have that growth that is needed. Some friction is needed. Now it should be healthy friction, right? Our system is geared to create people who will be deeply unhappy. We have a wardrobe full of beliefs, essentially misaligned beliefs. I could even make an argument that skills are irrelevant. How could you learn cooking without cooking yourself? And how could you learn to be a pilot without flying? How could you be a filmmaker without making films, right?
Earlier, knowledge was power. Today, knowledge is a commodity.
Do your dharma. This is gut-wrenching change ahead of us.
First of all, Sharad, welcome to the podcast and to Attitude Makeover.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's an honor to have you here. I want to start with what we always hear these days. India has got this demographic dividend, and it's a great opportunity for us. And the next 10 years are game-changing for our country. But there's another side to it as well, which is if we don't do it right, opportunity could become a big disaster as well for us. So our median age is around 28, and by 2030, I read that we have a population which is the youngest that is out there working. So I feel it's also a point where we are in some ways exaggerating, but probably redefining civilization, if I can call it that. So then this conversation today is about what's holding us back, what would take us from it being an opportunity to a disaster. So if I am that 28-year-old or hovering around that age, how should I look at myself from a consumer of this to a designer of my own journey? That's a conversation. And so welcome on board.
Thank you so much. And just to put this in perspective, this year we'll have 23 million babies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The next is China, which is under 9 million babies. In fact, if you take the next 4-5 countries, they will collectively account for 23 million babies. So for the foreseeable future, we are in effect, and I often get into trouble for saying it like this, but we are the cradle for humanity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what we do in the next 20 years is of course important for India, for India's sake, but it is safe to say that it is very important for the world's sake. And so therefore this topic is an important topic.
Well, I thought you would say no to the latter part, which is, sort of paving a foundation for the civilization to evolve.
So I've been thinking about that. But for example, I've often in recent years been thinking about how significant is the change ahead of us. And I like to believe that it is the kind of change that happened in 500 years with the start of the Renaissance in Florence, and a succession of things that happened leading to the Industrial Revolution and the Age of Enlightenment. That 500 years, we'll have to redo the whole thing in 50 years or less. And therefore, it is going to be perhaps painful, exceptionally painful. And and it will certainly redefine what it means to be human. And so this is gut-wrenching change ahead of us.
It is, right?
And I, for one, don't know almost any of the answers. But I think this conversation that you are kind of starting, which in your podcast, I'm hoping will continue with many others, I think is an important conversation, because from these conversations, some clarity might start emerging as well.
So let's go to ground zero. Today, as the present world is, how we look at jobs changed. Everything that we had as a definition of job, gone. So many jobs can be eliminated in a matter of months or next couple of years.
Sure.
So it's gone. The foundation or the anchoring that we have to an identity of who we are, whether it is family, relationships, marriage, changing drastically. With us leaving homes and moving away, that whole support system or that scaffolding that we had for mental stability also has changed.
Right.
With so much changing around us, whether you are a 25 to 28-year-old or a parent of a child who's studying, a lot of concerns as to what is this uncertainty and how to deal with it. Are these the three big buckets, or are there others that are also changing for us?
Yeah, so in human relationships, all human relationships are changing. Mating, for example, is completely changed or is changing because of, let's say, social media, right? Parent-child relationship is going to change. Spousal relationship will change. But I think even the relationship between capital and labor is changing. Therefore, the relationship between the employer and the employee is going to change. I think the relationship between the citizen and state is going to change. So I think we are almost at a point where, a kind of a system that we crafted, as I said, in the last 200 or so years, is up for change. Now, this has happened before, but you came to that point very slowly. The Renaissance Revolution made papal structure, the Pope, very powerful in Europe. And that resulted in what was then called as the Age of Indulgences, right? Where, popes had mistresses and everything was easily, you could solve everything by paying money to it. And then you had the printing press. And remember, how did they complain about the prevailing Christianity was to simply print the Bible, take a page, tear it, and stick it on the church. Because the Christianity that was in the Bible and the Christianity that was in the Age of Indulgences was completely different. You didn't have to say more, right? So things started collapsing. And therefore now in central Germany, you had towns and villages and cities where they were at war with each other, right? Because they were Protestants and Catholics, and they were literally killing each other. And then this new idea came from a completely, left field, from medicinal baths, right? At that time, and even today, there are lots of medicinal baths that are there. And the whole family would go there because that was a way to detox yourself and stay healthy. And therefore, everybody would be nude, right? In the family. And they said, hey, for the purpose of medicinal baths, because they are medicinal baths, nudity is detached from sexuality. And out came an idea that if you could do that for baths, why can't we detach your religious beliefs from running the town council, right? And so the original idea of a separation of church and state came from a very lateral area. And then, of course, it got codified in the French Revolution, and the revolution then shifted to industrial revolution in UK, the steam engine, which resulted in children being employed in the factory because you didn't need the brawn anymore. And for men, it was very, very hard because the identity of a man was brawn. And suddenly you didn't need the brawn. What is worse, You were taking 8-year-olds to do the work of what a brawny man used to do. Think of the identity crisis then. And that created its own kind of problems that we know about that led Karl Marx to write the famous manifesto in 1848. And instead of that becoming the mainstream thing, a whole revamping of what is the education system, what's the law and order system, what's the political system, all of that changed in one go. In a place where feudalism thrived, suddenly it became okay for a prince and a pauper to go to the same school, or expectation was that they would go to the same school. The amount of radical thinking that happened at that time, which became pervasive, is amazing. So, as people say, you can go to 1800 anywhere in the world and go the previous 1,000 years and you'll find no change. And then you look at that 100 years, from that, change. And there is massive change. And that massive change is generally all in the same direction. So I think we will very soon come to a similar moment again, where we have to completely redefine all our systems that are there, parenting, education, politics, because of this accumulation of change, especially driven by AI, that is going to be about.
I want to go a little more deeper in this conversation and bring you to India. When you look at power, earlier knowledge was power. Today knowledge is a commodity. When you and I have access to GPT, and if you have a great smart device, you have access to knowledge, and intelligence thereby becomes very easily accessible and commoditized. That changes the power structure completely. Yes. And India, if you actually look at it, had a power structure which is very knowledge centric.
Right.
How is that changing for us now when we talk about all these aspects, whether it is job, identity, family, the scaffolding that we need, the support systems that are required? How is that changing for us?
Yeah. I have an old injury because of which I get physiotherapy every Saturday. And my physiotherapist is a part philosopher, right? And he describes saying that if he was to go back in time, and you had this conversation with a surgeon, and let's say a primary care doctor and a physiotherapist, there was a pecking order, which is now changing, right? Yes. Because now the primary care physician is worried about AI, and, would you need that physician in the way that you've used the physician before? Is very clear. The answer to that is no. No, the surgeon is worried because they say, look, all this robotic stuff is coming and that's going to change. And suddenly the most comfortable person there is the physiotherapist. Yes. So this reordering that's going to happen because of equivalent of that brawn going away. Right? And what replaced it was skills. So it became very important to be a skilled ironsmith. It wasn't about brawn, but it was about skills. Now the question that you're asking is, as this intelligence or knowledge becomes really, really available to you, and this is not an overnight development, it's been coming slowly our way, but it's accelerating, then what do you do? And the question, I think, is the best answer that I have to that is that I think prediction is going to be replaced by judgment. See, back in time, even if you go back 10 years, your ability to predict was very, very limited. Any situation, right? Will it rain tomorrow? Or, if I have this study plan, will it give me the results that I want? If I have this exercise plan, will it give me the results that I want? Their life is full of many such predictions. They are all getting generally automated, and we have lots of predictions that become available to us. So the question now is that what do you do with them?
With that.
And that requires judgment. And that judgment is inherently a value-based exercise. Right? So therefore, if you and I get the same set of predictions, the judgment that we have to apply to now initiate action is inevitably going to depend on the values or beliefs or belief map that we have. And that belief map is going to change rapidly in the time. So in my mental model, we all carry with us a set of interrelated beliefs, uh, and we have a bouquet of beliefs, right? And this bouquet of beliefs has held us in good stead, but is now going to change. I'll tell a story here, and this comes from, in iSPIRT, one in the early days, we had a culture architect. His name is Manjunath Nanjaya, very, very smart guy. And he tells this story. He says that, look what happens when you have a porcupine, a new baby porcupine that is born. The mother is, sometimes the baby is born with misaligned quills. And because of misaligned quills, the baby is not able to fold and become a ball. And that is almost certain death in the wild. So what the mother has to do is to yank out painfully those misaligned quills to allow the baby to survive.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. So now what Manjunath's view is that when we grow up, we collect a set of beliefs. We collect it from our parents, then we go to school, then we collect it from schools, then we go to friends. The friends give us a set of beliefs, the movies, what we read. And by the time we get to we become a young adult, we have a wardrobe full of beliefs, essentially misaligned beliefs, because we collected them, opportunistically as we went along. They were not meant to be a coherent whole. Now, when we are in a very safe environment, it doesn't matter, right? But when you are in a difficult environment, then one belief says, hey, give up. The other belief says, be persistent, right? And you need to now sort out your beliefs. So you need to be able to, at that point in time, go through a kind of a cleanup process so that you have a coherent set of beliefs. Now, that's a very painful process, right? That metamorphosis is what traditionally we used to call it as the midlife crisis, right? So this would be people who would do everything that they were told to do. They said, go and become an engineer. They became an engineer. They said, go and join an MBA school. They went and joined. Then somebody came and hired them, and they did everything in the rat race. And they are now in their mid 30s and 40s, and there's emptiness that is taking them over. And so they need to clean that up. So there are two choices. Either you don't feel the pain, and then you buy a nice motorbike and just do adventure, right? Or you go back and address this painful thing. Now, this is happening in mid-20s. I got introduced to that, by a youngster who said that go and look at what is called as not midlife crisis, quarter life crisis. Right? And you can go to TEDx and see there's so many talks of these people in their 20s cleaning their belief system out. Right? So I think this is going to be the most important need for us. Where can we submit this idea to everybody that we know, that you must clean up your belief system, and it has to be done in a big way in your young adulthood. But then it has to be a relentlessly active process for the rest of your life. Because the world that you would live in your 30s will be very different from your world that you live in your 40s. It will require you to continuously, change the bouquet. Take something out, put something else in. And so your ability to work with your belief map all the time in an active way is going to be very important. And I would submit to you that if at all anybody in the world can do that, it is us in India. Because this isn't an alien concept for most people, right? And, focusing on inner work is not only okay, it is cool, right? And it's becoming cooler amongst the young people that we have. And so therefore that will become, I think, the focus for people. their ability to succeed in the outer world, of course, depends on their
Ability
inner
to
world. And the people who then work on the inner world will thrive more in the outer world than otherwise. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. And I agree with you completely. And this is the ethos of attitude makeover. Because I really believe when I took the change is so hard.
Yes.
And your beliefs and your past experiences are going to always hold you back.
Right.
So to your point earlier about, I feel in India, hard work is overrated, but judgment is underrated.
Right.
And we struggle to take the right decision at the right time.
Right.
Oftentimes, culturally, we are brought up in such a way that don't go to, mess up that system a bit. It's okay, isko thoda time do.
Yeah. You be the racehorse.
Yes.
You put the blinders
Right.
and just run on the path
Right.
that you've been told to run.
Yes.
And that doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work anymore. And I one of my favorite talks is Professor Vasanti. She was at that time in charge of the alumni. I think she still is. I'm a bitter critic of MBAs, so I have no shame in saying that. I think it is. So I won't go there. But
I want to hear this
But so Vasanti said, this they have this IM view. I think they do it once in 2 years, and she really insisted that I should come for that. And I said, my views on MBAs, right? And she says, no, those middle-aged people that are there in 35, they will like hearing this. And I think it was right. It was one of my most enjoyable talks. People are laughing and all that is happening because I think my perspective was actually resonating with them.
Yeah.
Because they had been in this rat race all this while, and the meaninglessness of that was very evident to them. So I think this old paradigm that get your child to just follow one of the 4, 5, 10 paths that are there is no longer viable. And so we need to therefore from an early age train our kids to have an inner life and be able to share their inner conversations with people in a meaningful fashion and evolve their belief map. And then only can they be a porcupine that will survive in this world.
So I have follow-up questions on this. 2 actually. The first one is the role of suffering in this, and I'll explain why. This bit that you are talking about, being aware of your beliefs and really going inwards, has 2 aspects that have to fall in place. One is the luxury of time, and the other one is basic Maslow's needs being met for you, like survival needs of money, roof on top, etc., etc. When that is not there, you're in that rut, the race, and you're constantly in that race, you don't know how to get out of it. So I feel suffering of any kind, like, for me, as a young child, it was a sudden change in the blueprint of our family that then made my mom say, okay, we're all going to be survivors. Education is the best gift I can give you. With that, you're going to survive anywhere in this world. And the blueprint starts getting bigger. You see, it comes from a struggle.
Yes.
Whereas if you don't have struggle, then things are all going fine. Why change?
Exactly. I fully agree with you. The only thing is I'll replace the word suffering with adversity.
Lovely.
Right? Because I think adversity can kill you or it can make you stronger. And I think the individual decides which one is going to happen, right? And if you decide to turn adversity into a gift, then it leaves you stronger, right? It's just a switch that you have. And I agree with you fully that adversity is going to be important. I am, therefore, a big fan many years ago. Phanindra Sama, many people will know him as the Redbus co-founder. He has a philosophy which I think is started picking up but needs to be picked up much more. he says, look, everybody needs adversity. And the way to court adversity is to become an entrepreneur. Right?
Very true.
Right?
Very true.
So he says that instead of going for Char Dham or for Hajj, this is the Char Dham and Hajj for you.
Yeah.
And his point is that whether or not you succeed in your entrepreneur venture, as long as you know that you're doing it to learn from the adversity to become a purer, a cleaner version of yourself, you will be better off, right? He calls it, because, and this is inspired by the Hindu idea that there's divinity inside but surrounded with lots of junk, and you have to get rid of the junk and then the pure form will be there. So he calls it becoming more pure. But it is the same idea. Adversity can force a better inner life. And if you look at it like that, then you're a winner. You're a single-time winner anyway, because it will leave you a better person. But you can also be an outer winner. But his point is, even if you don't win on the outside, you are still better off than anybody. It's such a powerful idea. So I completely agree.
I think what it also forces you to do is become lightweight. Let go. Like, you can't be heavy and go into adversity.
And your relationship with adversity changes.
Yes.
And there's a very interesting survey that happened. This is in many years back, before internet became prevalent. They said, what is common for all the people who have been successful? So the question is, what is success? So they said success is everybody who has at least a half-page obituary in Encyclopedia Britannica.
Interesting.
Right? This was the world of Encyclopedia Britannica. So they studied that. And guess what they found? That the most common thing, I don't remember the numbers now, but the overwhelming answer to that was that they had lost a parent in their childhood. So I can relate to that, because forced adversity then forces you to get your inner world in order to be able to face the world. And often, I have a very close friend. She's a famous author, and I tease her that she's a ladli beti, right? And because if your parents shield you from that adversity, then you will not have that learning, right? And in my case, I had very high myopia, and I wanted to be an engineer, and I couldn't legally become an engineer, because at that time, when I passed out in 82, there was all professional courses had a medical test, medical exam. UPSC had a standard which said -8 and above is medically unfit, and I was above that in both my eyes. And I would joke, and because in a family of civil servants, I would joke that I would never have to become a civil servant, right? But, inside I knew I could also not become an engineer. But for my chacha, who encouraged me, universe will find a way, you move forward. I may not have pursued it. But that was a form of small adversity. Then I had a very bad accident that, served as another dose of adversity. I've seen that with my daughter. She had her own medical adversity, and she wrote about it and her ability to overcome it in her essay. And to me, that description of her becoming stronger because of her adversity was the most meaningful thing I can imagine. And I today believe that the fact that anything else comes, her relationship with adversity is different. Because you have to almost, while you may not want to welcome it, you have to have a relationship with adversity, which says that, okay, you want to visit me, please do. I will turn you into a gift. And that has to be taught at an early age to children.
So what you're saying is, change is a constant. It's going to happen. We're all given terms and conditions or unwritten rules. It's time to look at every fine print, understand your relationship with each one of these, and consciously go through an inner transformation.
And I would add one more item to that. So I think this metamorphosis, in early age is important, because we collect, as we talked about, we have to have a good belief system. Why is a belief system important is because there's this famous saying by Alvin Toffler. He used to be very popular in our younger days. I'm sure you
The
also...
illiterate of the...
Yes, and Future Shock and Power Shift and stuff like that. My favorite quote from him is that your ability to change is a function of your unchanging core.
Wow.
Right? So he says, what do you choose as your unchanging core? For somebody who says, Salem is my unchanging core, sure, and that will allow you to change anything and everything. Because I want to stay in Salem, I'll do any job that is needed to be able to stay in Salem. For some people, it'll be a relationship that you're talking about. Now that's become very difficult, right? Because, today's kids cannot count on lifelong relationships anymore. So I think the unchanging core, the most viable form of unchanging core is your own belief map. And so therefore you have to take charge of it and own it and improve it in a very conscious fashion. And not only the first time in your young adulthood, but on an ongoing basis. And the only motivation to do that is when your belief map rubs against the reality and is found to be wanting.
Yeah.
That is the only time you will actually make a change. And therefore you have to put yourselves in position where that is actually going to take place. Now, elite sports people know that all the time, right? Yeah. While they'll train for a year, they'll put themselves in a situation which is going to completely, put them outside their comfort zone. And so this idea that you need, we call it in iSPIRT, we say we have this idea that you need both a Ran Bhumi and a Rang Bhumi to be the best version of yourself. The Ran Bhumi is the competitive part.
Yes.
Because that gives you stark messages that you are not enough. There's something missing. That's what the elite sports people do when they compete. The Rang Bhumi is the space when you are just wanting to do the best version of that character that you want to play. You're not competing with anybody else. You're competing with yourself to be the character that you want to be. You're on the theater stage. And I think to be the best version of yourself in this, in this changing environment, you need to find your Rang Bhumi, which is the competitive area, and your Rang Bhumi. Now, Ran Bhumi is easy to find. The Rang Bhumi is hard to find. And I think we need to give people that space so that they can actually develop.
For someone who is like a 25, 28-year-old who's watching this, how do you identify, hey, this is me he's talking about? Can you kind of give an example or a set? Like, it could be relationships, it could be health, it could be career, it doesn't matter. And it could be from a city, it could be from a tier 2 place as well, non-Indian as well. So what?
So I'll give you an example. Look, in our case, we work on very hard problems for a long period of time, right? With failure is inherent in that process. Our mental model used to be able to do this, to be able to solve this problem, we need very talented people. So, we would say these are people who learn to play the violin so well that they are in demand. And, they're busy playing the violin in a commercial setting all through the week, but their heart wants to play in the park, in the subway, right? Nice. And iSPIRT is that park and subway where you come and play for the public good, no greed, no glory. While you have a day life where you are much sought after, violin player in a commercial setting. And then luckily for us and completely by accident, we've had this system that we don't know who's a good volunteer. So everybody goes through an interim stage, try and buy type of a stage to figure this out. And then we started seeing these young, early 20 guys doing exceptionally well. And there was enormous cognitive, dissonance because they don't know how to play the violin. Right? Yeah. They are still learning how to play the violin. But what they had, or some of them have, is this fearlessness in the face of a difficult challenge. Right? And so when you combine that fearlessness of those, now 30% of our volunteers are under 30, and some of our best volunteers are under 30. If many of us in iSPIRT, if you told us 5 years ago that this would be the case, we would have laughed at you, because our mental model didn't have place for them.
Yeah.
Now what we do is we take all our violin players and put them under in this 25-year-old who's running the show, because the fearlessness comes from there. So you need both elements. I think the young people, many of them who are really coming and working on their inner self and are not in this rat race, they are not vested in the rat race, because they have a abundance mindset, not a scarcity mindset, I think are able to develop themselves in the context of a problem that guides them. I feel that people are becoming more idealistic because they are chasing life in a very different way. You know, back in time, the best way to chase success was you have a bigger cars, bigger house, and so on and so forth. Then we, especially in R&D, you know, and you grew up amongst all technical people, they have not ever subscribed to that. For them, it would be whether they are in their zone, you know, they're doing good work. The work itself would put them in situations that will give them. So if they were doing 10 hours of work a week, which was put them in the zone, they're looking to make it 20 hours, 30 hours if they could. And now I think you have the third element that has become very prominent, which is that even young people say, I want to be part of something larger than myself. I want meaningful work. And in the past, the only way to do that was in the context of religion, right? The only kind of a setup where you could be part of something larger than yourself was to be part of religion. You know, but you look at India, you know, you see Abdul Kalam. Why does he have such a fan following amongst the people who he worked with? Because he elevated them to work for something that was meaningful. This is what Vikram Sarabhai did. This is what Homi Baba did. So now you can find meaningful things to do in outside of religion. And these young people, I find, are gravitating to that. So once you find a meaningful goal, you know, let's say my mother's family was very active in the freedom movement. So from their side, the meaningful thing was to get India freedom. You couldn't do it all by yourself. It was a larger goal than any individual that you have. But being part of that movement, you know, became a very important way to then design for yourself where those friction points would be. And then from there, you get the people that would actually be the best version of themselves. Now, sometimes it is thrown at you because, you know, some people had to move here because of partition, let us say. They had to reinvent their life. They had no choice in the matter. But for some people, they had a choice in the matter. And yet they said, no, this is meaningful for me. I'm going to make this a focus of my life. So I think what is not going to disappear are the set of meaningful problems to attack. And I think we have to now teach our young people not to be focused on the journey, but to be focused on the journey, of course, but not to be on pre-described things, you know, do your engineering, then do this, then do that, but instead focus on solving a meaningful problem in collaboration with other people, and then discover your own limitation, your self-limiting beliefs, because that's the only way they will surface, and then kind of clean them up as you go forward. This kind of process, you could say, is almost the new religion that we need.
So this is almost incorporating agile, systemic way of going through solving or redesigning for yourself, right? That's what you're saying.
And this is not a new idea. I mean, you can never develop character in the easy mode, as they say, right? I mean, there's some saying to that effect. So you have to submit yourself to some difficult challenges that should be your own choosing, and then out of those will emerge, you know, the insights that will help you become better.
I have questions. So when I started Attitude Makeover, I had 11-year-olds following me. I never understood why I had 11-year-olds following me initially. But later on, I saw a research which talked about how all of us in our lifespan go through at least 4 reboots in life. So your adolescence, your 20s, where
Right.
marriage, relationship, and job, everything comes. Then your 30s, where you become that sandwich population. You have to take care of your aging parents and your children and you and your spouse. Finally, in your 60s, where one of them have lost one of them, and so suddenly an actualization happened. But in each one of this, it's the identity that is going through,
Right.
the who am I part that's going through change. And then I realized too, you spoke about it earlier as well, there's a left shift that is happening, which is why when you talk to the youngsters today, they're very aware of some bit of the inner self
Right.
than our age. Like I feel
Right.
in a lot of ways we've
Yeah.
failed in that.
Yeah. So I think we have to give them one other thing that is important. And I think in a way you are doing that from my perspective. See, there's this famous saying that you can never read the label of the bottle from the inside. Right? So even if you're put in an adverse situation, let's say that creates the condition for, you know, a kind of an inner upgrade, going from version 1.6 to 1.7 in your inner OS that you have.
Yeah.
But for that to happen, it is very important that you can see where the mismatch is. So you need somebody else to help you see that mismatch. Right? And so I at least am a believer that it cannot be a completely solitary process. Right? Because a solitary process is important, but it is necessary but not sufficient. You need some well-wisher that you can trust who is able to help you see where the mismatch is happening. Now that is only possible if you build a set of people or friendships or with adults, right, where you can have an inner conversation about your fears in a way that you normally don't have on social media, right? So I think there is a whole kind of a collective process that you need for this. So first you have to teach people how to share their inner conversation, right, in with people, and it's a slow process of building trust. Then you begin to trust them and say, okay, I can share my deepest fears with you. And what are fears? Fears are a way of saying, you will not be able to cope in this situation. And those fears are important, but they have to be supplemented by an outside-in view in addition to the inside-out view that you have. So you need people who have the wisdom. They're not just good listeners. They're also people who can actually give you a sense of what's missing. And then they are not protecting you from the inherent friction that will bring the change about, but are actually, guiding that process of change because of the friction that has come about.
True.
So we need almost new type of ecosystems that we build around ourselves. And, would that include parents? It could. Would it include uncles and aunts? It could. Will it include friends? Yes. Would it include godmen and godwomen? Maybe, but we need to give our children an ability to pursue this process where they recognize that their outer success is going to be a function of what is the inner work that they've done.
So we went deep into the identity part of the problem and covered quite a bit of things. So for someone who's watching this, suddenly to find that kind of a support system is not easy.
Yeah.
How would you suggest one starts that blueprint?
I think in an early age, we got to tell people that friends are not people that you have fun with. Friends are people that will be there with you when the adversity strikes. I think we have to start by changing the definition of friendship. I think the cancer in our society, which prevents all this from happening, and I'm going to get beaten up for saying that, is Hollywood and Bollywood.
I want you to go deeper into this.
It is completely rotten worldview that they subscribe to. Including this in my view, idea that you need a soul mate, right? I mean, that there is this one person who's going to make you complete. Inherent in this is this idea that happiness is somebody else's responsibility. If you find that person, I will be happy. All this mythology around happiness itself is broken, right? So it starts there. And then, the relationships that are described are also unreasonable and unsustainable. And we know that because the evidence is overwhelming, as we see. So therefore I think all this can be used for good purposes. And lastly, it promotes what I would call as completely vanity metrics, right? And unfortunately, that is also true for business. The vanity metrics in business is that instead of focusing on the fundamentals of the business, you focus on a set of financial metrics, which result in which are ratios usually, and therefore you manage the ratios by, instead of growing the numerator, which was the original idea, you do it by shrinking the denominator. And in so shrinking the denominator, you go away from R&D. So at a time, think of this, where the business is awash with capital in a way that it has never been in recent history. The amount of that capital that is being spent on R&D is less than before, because these ratios are all about chasing, efficiency instead of kind of breakthrough research that we're talking about. So much so that even OpenAI could not happen in a commercial setting, had to be done in a non-profit setting. Now, that's another matter that, they're trying to change that, and that has its own controversy. But the point is that we've been taken over by vanity metrics in life, in relationships, and all that is being amplified by this industrial social media Bollywood Hollywood complex that is leading our people astray. So I think I would add one more thing to this, and I find that correlation very strong. You remember I mentioned all these people, these young people who are turning out to be fantastic volunteers. If I was to see what is the proxy thing to predict, is are they contrarians or not?
You need to have an opinion first to be able to.
Exactly.
Right?
And then you must have the enough confidence that you can maybe wrongly be contrarian about some things. But being contrarian is a muscle. It's not a thinking muscle. It's a feeling muscle. Right? Because if it's a popular movie that you have not gone and seen because you're a contrarian, it's nothing to do with thinking. It is your ability to stand with your friends and say, I am okay. I don't need to do that. Yeah. I don't need to wear these kind of clothes. I don't need to wear, be fit in these kind of ideas. That is a feeling muscle. I think we need a thinking muscle, we need a feeling muscle, and then we need a values, this belief system that will anchor all of this for us to take this forward. And we are not teaching people enough of the contrarian message. And because in our culture, fitting in is still very important. Yeah. And that, I think, is one of the big changes that we have to bring about as we go forward.
But that is hard, right? Like, it is so hard in our culture, especially. Like, I'll give you an example. And probably it's even more difficult for a woman than a man. Like, everything, right? From who you hang out with, what friends you have, what you study, where you study, who you get married, and literally everything is sort of influenced. It's not your blueprint. It is terms and conditions that are given to you.
I agree with you. And I think, therefore, I tend to believe that youngsters are, for women, social media and the likes are feeding a monster that is making them less capable of being able to step outside what the conventional viewpoint is. And I think in the case of men, I think young men, what's playing an equally corrosive effect is pornography. Yeah. Right? And so therefore, what was sex was meant for human connection, meaningful human connection is now lost, right? And so therefore, so I think that's what I mean. I think our system is geared to create people who will be deeply unhappy with the environment in the world that they live in. They're not improving happiness. So therefore, we have to start by saying we are in a broken system, which is going to become worse as we go forward. And therefore, can I find inside me the capacity to figure out what would be right for me and then build forward from there. So we therefore have to turn everybody into, in some sense, not a tool user, because that the AI will do for you, a tool builder, a story creator, not a story follower, a philosopher, not just a bhajan singer, right? And so I think that is the shift that we need. And as I mentioned in our pre-conversation when we're just warming up, the reason I'm cautiously optimistic is that I feel that when you create the right conditions for this, when you have a Ran Bhumi and a Rang Bhumi and an inspiration, then youngsters take to it in a big way. And to me, India's revolution that is taking place in chess amongst essentially young teens is remarkable. And India has more chess grandmasters than any other country. And it's because the inspiration is there, right? Because of Vishy Anand and the whole system that he and others, Westbridge, created. Ability to do it on their own is there, and the Rang Bhumi is very common. You participate, but there's a place you can sit at home, which is in the comfort and the safety of your home, is your Rang Bhumi that you're practicing. And I think, the parents in many of these cases are playing a very important role, often sacrificing whatever they can to give their children that environment. So to me, in some sense, that is the metaphor of tomorrow. And can we repeat that, for a very wide population of our children? And if we can, then I think there's a reason to be hopeful.
Oh, let's go to the third one, skills. It's not unemployment, it's actually skills that are our Achilles heel. Agree, or what's your perspective there?
I feel skills, of course, are important. I could even make an argument that skills are irrelevant, right? So the old model of acquiring skills was to go into some kind of a structured setting and, let's say, quote unquote, a school, a pilot flying school, right? Or
Can you take MBA itself?
Or a culinary school, right? Yeah. I'm purposely using these examples in addition to other skills that we have. A filmmaking school, right? We would go in these places and learn the skills. Now what has happened is that all that learning, all that transfer of knowledge that would take place for you to go from a novice to a middling expert to an expert would happen through human interaction.
True.
Right? Because how could you learn cooking without cooking yourself? Right? And how could you learn to be a pilot without flying? How could you be a filmmaker without making films? Right? And how could you learn all this but for learning it from other teachers, right, who were much more skilled in being able to do that? Now, one way of looking at AI is that it is able to codify those skills in a way that even humans could not. So let me see if I can use chess as an example. Let's say you and I go for a walk every day to the park. And in the park, there are two grandmasters who are playing chess. And we linger there to watch a game every day, right? Do you think we'll become chess grandmasters by watching them play?
No, but you'll sort of understand some bits.
You will understand. You'll become appreciative. Yes. You can become it's like classical music. You can learn to appreciate music better. But being appreciative of the music doesn't make you a classical musician. But an AI system will actually learn enough to play chess in in a fashion that a human being cannot learn.
Yeah.
So what for the first time we have is that our AI systems are able to learn by watching human interactions that humans themselves cannot learn as quickly, right? So therefore that then completely changes the nature of learning for skills.
Yeah.
Because now you don't need to learn in the old film school, old culinary school, old flight training school. You can now learn from AI systems and
It's on the go.
accelerate that learning, do it just in time. And therefore, this is, by the way, true for pilots.
Yeah.
You know, the number of hours that the pilots actually fly are now very limited. I don't remember the numbers, but you know, most of it happens in a simulation environment, right? A simulator environment. So this is changing. So I think skills will become available to anybody and everybody because they'll be democratized in a way that was not possible. Today, to get into a pilot school or to get into all of these schools was really hard. But that's not hard anymore. This is what's happening with chess. It's not hard to play in the best chess school possible.
Yeah.
It just happens to be, you know, an AI chess trainer. Everybody has access to it. So then what makes a difference between you acquiring that skill and not acquiring that skill is then you're persistent, we go back to the all that learner mindset that you have and all the inner work that you're doing, because the outer work has become a lot simpler than before. So this relationship is going to change, I think, in a big way. So therefore, I think it'll still, you will have a competence hierarchy. You'll have a house painter and a Michelangelo. You know, you will be able to look at this and see the difference. You will still have a situation where two people who go to the same law school, and when you look at their office, have the same case law behind them. One would charge 5 lakhs an hour and another person is charging 50,000 an hour, because they are materially different in their skill sets, because they lie at different. I don't think that hierarchy will go away, but the way you arrive at a higher point in the hierarchy would be less access to teachers, less access to schools, and more about your inner work that you are able to do to take advantage of everything that is available.
I want to ask one question here. This was good now for not just the haves, but the have-not children as well, isn't it?
Suddenly, think so. I have a feeling that have-nots have an advantage.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm cautiously optimistic. And, you know, when my daughter was young and, you know, you sometimes impose things vicariously, and she'll agree with me on that. You know, I was fond of tinkering and all of that, so I got her interested in robotics.
Oh,
right.
You got her a Raspberry Pi.
And at that time, Lego Mindstorm, and then they have these competitions. And then, you know, she formed a team, and then I remember we did a night out, and they were very enthusiastic, but so was I, because it was vicariously my competition that I was living through that. Now, however, when you went to the competition, the people who were doing well were people who didn't even have their own kit, because they were from a small town and many teams had to share the same kit. But the hunger was higher, right? And in her class, you know, she was good in athletics, and so she would run. Karnataka has a very good children's sports program, so she was in the school team, and you know, you needed everything, spike shoes and this, that, and the other. And then when you go for the competition there, the team that would win is Parikrama. Now, who is their coach? Ashwini Nachappa. Her daughter is in Anika's class, but she says, I don't want to teach these kids because the kids who are hungry to make something happen are the Parikrama kids who are all running barefoot. Right? Look, this is the metaphor for life. This democratization is actually, if we create the right systems, it will actually be taken up by people who live in adversity, because that adversity gives them the inner OS. You know, a child, my daughter may have had 1 or 2 minor upgrades in the OS, but a child who comes from a difficult background would have had many minor and perhaps one or two major upgrades in their OS. So what will distinguish people who climb up the competence hierarchy and who don't would be this inner work, adversity, having a support system that allows them to see outside in, the label of the bottle from the outside, having the skills to be able to verbalize your inner conversation, especially fears. And if you can create all this for young people, and I think we can. And how do we do that? It won't happen in schools. It will happen in families.
At home.
At home. And I think it will happen in families because this vocabulary of inner work is acceptable vocabulary for almost any inner family. Right? You can go anywhere and they can understand this vocabulary because this is so native to our way of thinking. You brought up word suffering. Buddhism is based on that.
Yes.
Everybody in India understands this relationship that is there. And we have persistence. And I think karma as a concept will come back. Having said this, I'm an agnostic. I'm myself not a believer, but I see societal benefits of this. My old way of explaining karma was that I go to US, I go to a Neiman Marcus, which is a very expensive store, and you'll find somebody at the counter buying something, paying for it, which is more than the annual salary of the store clerk.
Yes.
It is not at all unusual. And the American dream is to the store clerk, don't worry, work hard, you will be one there, right? In India, you would say, don't worry, live a moral life, next life will be better, right? And this is how you deal with inequality in both places. So I have a somewhat controversial way of looking at this, that it's a societal hack to keep society stable. But I think the new societal hack that we need is persistence in the face of adversities. And I think the best way to do that, what is karma? You have a difficult time, something bad happened to you, do isko nibha lo, do your dharma, and that is all that you can do, and everything will be all right. Maybe not in this life, maybe in the next life.
True.
Right?
True.
So this detachment to immediate outcomes, outer outcomes, to do the right thing, which is in consonance with your inner world, is, I think, more naturally available to Indian kids than to any other kid anywhere else in the world. Right?
Yeah.
And I really have thought of this because the kids in Israel, because of Judaism, have better? No. It's actually the Indian kids have the best. And I think their parents understand this. So our job in the future is to create this new environment around kids, which will allow them to succeed as they go forward. Now, of course, societal change is needed. We can talk about that. That's an endless topic by itself.
I was just going to that. When I do these workshops, oftentimes there's a struggle of intergenerations working together in corporate world, right? And so they always talk about how do you handle that. So again, it comes to certain key characteristics, my beliefs, my experiences. Like my parents' age, they grew up, or I was an emergency child. So, that environment is very different. My generation, it was peace. There's a lot of peace around us. Right? But their generation, my daughter is like, what is happening? Like Trump is going, every day there's a new statement, and everything seems to impact everybody. So it's a state of flux that's happening. And you're so optimistic in this state of flux because whatever you're told is not like easy work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, see,
it's like fighting the tide, right?
Societal change in India. So, I'll give you an example. If somebody came to me and said that India will be doing 50% of the world's digital transactions today, I would have said, no, I wish it is true. It's in the realm of possibility, but I don't think it will happen. But the fact is we do it today, right? And so why is that? Because I think we attack the problem at a deeper level. The way I describe it to people is that, let us say your phone's not working well, and I don't know whether you have an iPhone or a. So one justification for having an iPhone over Android phone, other than vanity, is that it had better battery performance
No.
than Android back in time.
Yeah, back then. Yes.
Right? So if I came to you, and let's say somebody came to me and said, Sharad, you have an Android, your battery performance sucks. Because no matter which phone you had, Samsung or whichever, LG or whatever phone that you had, it would have inferior battery performance to iPhone. So somebody came to me and said, I can fix this problem. No, it's a generic problem. Okay, how can you fix it? They would say, I'll give you this app, you just install this app and everything will be fixed. And I know enough about phones to know that's not possible. But even if I didn't know about phones, I'd say, okay, I'll give it a try, and it will not work because this wasn't an app problem. It was affecting all the apps.
True.
It was actually an OS problem.
True.
And when Google looked at the OS problem, they realized, yes, they had an OS problem. But in addition to that, since OS itself is based on something deeper called Linux kernel, it's also a Linux kernel problem. So they had to go to these volunteers who run Linux kernel and say, hey, can you fix this problem? So it took some time for Linux kernel to fix it, to Android to fix it, and then of course it got fixed. Today Android has better battery performance than iPhone. So much so that iPhone then started cheating because their whole reputation was built on better battery performance. So to give you the impression of better battery performance, they started slowing down your phone. Right? Now, had they done that by telling you, this wouldn't have been a problem. But they were so embarrassed about this that they did it without telling anybody. And then there was a class action lawsuit and they ended up paying out. They lost their lawsuit and ended up paying out for it. So societal change is like that. Societal change is an open kind of a system that you have to attack at the principles level, which for want of anything, at the Veda level. You have to attack at the OS level, which is, let's say, at the Gita or the Bible level. And then you have the manifestation of this, which is the bhajan level. Most people live their life only at the bhajan level. So if you have 1,000 people, you ask them, let's say 1,000 Christians, and how many of them have fully understood the Bible? It'll be a handful, maybe less than 10 of those 1,000. Same is the case amongst Hindus. And then if you ask amongst them and say, how many of you have spent time understanding the Upanishads? It'll be probably one, if at all, right? So now this order has to change. And this order cannot change with grown-up people because they are resistant to change. They're not going to change their life. But why can't it change with the young people? For those 23 million babies that are going to be born this year, why can't it change in their next 5, 7, 10 years life? Of course it can change. We have to build a society where instead of 999 people or 990 people living the life only at the bhajan level, we have a larger number living at the Gita level and also a larger number living at the Veda level, and create this connection amongst all the three so that, even the bhajan singers are, living, they are more in consonance with the changes that have taken place. I think we as a society can do that. And it inevitably will involve the family to make that happen. And I think it is possible to do that, but that's the challenge that we have. So it is a cultural change because this is all part of culture. So we have to embrace, just the way we've been talking about, an individual has to take charge of their inner belief map in concrete terms, in terms and say, I will first sit down and understand my belief map. Then I will understand what are the limitations based on the situation I'm facing. Then I'll set up, have a small team of people helping me change that belief map because that's going to be very hard to do. But I'll commit to this exercise. Same we have to do for culture. We have to, for the first time, take an organized way to hack culture, to suit the new world that we are going in. And I think there has to be something unchanging in that. Because any change requires something to be unchanging. And our core culture is still okay. And so therefore, I think we'll be able to make many changes to our culture in a way that maybe other societies are not able to do.
I want to ask one question. I first of all agree with you. I'm not at all contradicting on anything. I agree also because as a seller, when I was in my previous avatar, It's easier. Sales is not easy, but it's easier to sell technology than it is to change adoption
Right.
of what you sold. And that comes back to culture.
Right.
A lot of it is very intrinsic to us and our ability to change or our inability to change, right? So the question is, for someone who's actually listening and has lasted this long, how do I think system for me? Like, I am used to learning systems from an engineering perspective, like a car as a system, an infrastructure as a system, etc., banking as a system. But I as a system, how do I think? Because that's what you're asking me to do.
So if I was to design a system, I would definitely include. See, there's some things that will become less important. Learning, facts is not important even today. You have the phone to do that. Learning concepts, let's say concepts of physics, which are usually counterintuitive concepts, right? I think they will remain important because, as somebody says, since you grew up in a science kind of a background, one view of science is that science is about counterintuitive concept.
Yeah.
Intuitive concept is that, that sun goes around the earth, but the counterintuitive concept is that earth goes around the sun. And, you can see hundreds of those that are there. So our ability to learn counterintuitive concepts is not going to go away. But the way we will learn them will change dramatically. The third is that we have to ultimately become aware of our ability to share inner conversations with somebody else. Now, this is something that we don't teach anybody.
We ourselves don't know how.
Most of the time, we don't know ourselves because it's effortful. It is frowned upon, right? And share with whom? Because it makes you so vulnerable that somebody can take advantage of this, And so, how do you share this? And how do you then build an ecosystem around you? Initially of your parents, maybe your teachers, eventually your friends, not the conventional friends, but a new type of inner work friends who can be a guide for this. And the only way you can do them is by telling even an 11-year-old, saying that the best way to learn is to teach. And so therefore put that 11-year-old as somebody who is going to be somebody else's mentor, and another 11-year-old child's mentor, maybe an 8-year-old's child mentor, in making the inner work happen. You cannot simply rely on godmen. That era of godmen being your coaches to tell you how to do inner work is not going to be sufficient in the future. So you'll have to surround yourself with people, and therefore you'll have to, just the way people say, let me find good friends. This has to become the definition of finding good friends, right? And this is what has to become the definition of becoming good uncles and aunts and parents. And I think that is the cultural change that we need. It is not the payload of that change that we need to worry about. That the system will define, the environment will define. It is these mechanics of change that we have to put in place. This is the infrastructure of change that we have to put in place. New infrastructure of change is needed. And that software infrastructure that you are trying to establish, even for employees in a company setting, has to also happen for students in a learning setting. And I think we can do it if we set our minds to it.
You always optimistic? Because I'm telling you.
No, look at chess, it's happened.
But
if chess had not happened, I would not be so
Sharad,
optimistic.
It took 30 years, right?
Right. I have a friend who became a very important person in Uber. He started off here, Google, and then went on. And he says that amongst our Uber drivers, the fastest learners are Indians.
Yeah.
So there is, I think, in India, an ability to deal with, in your world, you would call it VUCA, right? Indians are more conditioned to VUCA. What's the full form? Volatility, uncertainty. And then you have C and A, maybe they'll tell us, but living in a chaotic environment, right? Now chaos is not going to go away. It's going to be even more manifest than before, till society settles down 50 years later into some kind of a new system. And we are better prepared to do it than anybody else.
what I'm also saying then is, what you're saying is, when we do this, we're so used to linear growth in the past. When we do this, this is such foundational shifts that happen. And the payload then is no longer linear, it's more moonshot.
Okay, let me ask, yes, of course. Let me ask you a different question. This is something that we wrestle with in health stack all the time. At $2,000 per capita, we can give our population good health. How do we know that? Because many European companies are doing it. Do we have $2,000? No, our per capita income is $2,000. We can't put all of it in health. We know from Thailand that we can do it at $600. But $600 is also too much, 30% of our per capita income. We have to somehow manage to do it around $200. The only way to do $200 is to focus on preventive health and early detection. Now, early detection is smarter devices and proliferating point of care. All that is technology centric. But I would say preventive care is cultural. And I can make an argument today that if we have to give the right nudges so that people begin to focus on preventive care, the chances of success in India are higher. Because find me a family that doesn't believe that yoga is a good thing to do. They may not do it, but they have a mental belief already that this is the right thing to do. So the question is, how do you turn belief into action? So I think because our culture, we need to create new cultural infrastructure that takes our very core principles that are there, links them more tighter with the vulgarized form, and then with the most vulgarized form, which is the habits that we live with. And I think if we can create the new cultural infrastructure by using families in a new way, by using teaching in a new way, by using technology in a new way, in an integrated way, I think we can do this. And while we are focused on digital public infrastructure, this is cultural public infrastructure that we need to create. I am not the right one to do that because I am, in my daughter's eyes, a Sheldon who doesn't know enough about all of this. So she must be anyway closing her eyes and saying, please stop talking. What do you know about all of this? But I think there's smarter people like you and others who have the wherewithal to do that. And I think we can bring about dramatic change in our society. I think, I've been lucky to be part of that dramatic change in the digital world. I think that dramatic change is going to happen in R&D infrastructure in the next 10 years. We are at the cusp of it. It looks difficult. It is not easy, but I think it will happen. But it requires, as I say, Bangalore, Delhi and Mumbai to come together. Bangalore is the thought leadership capital. Mumbai is where market comes in and policy comes from Delhi. So I think we'll be able to put that together because it's coming together. And the need of the hour is for us to have strategic autonomy, which is only possible if we focus on R&D. So I think we will see a wave of R&D infrastructure. And I'll be much too old then. But if I was going to be around, then I would love to be now a student, go back from designing that, because I don't think it is my competence, but to be a field worker, a field warrior in making the cultural infrastructure come in place that will allow a young child in India to fix their belief map and keep doing that again and again. Basically do inner work at a pace that no other child in the world is able to do. Because I think there is groundswell of favorable conditions to do that.
This is so contagious. Your opportunistic perspective is so contagious. One part that worries me in this conversation is the divide that we constantly are having between the haves and the have-nots. Till about 3 years back, I was like in a bubble. And when I started getting out of the bubble, going to our remotest villages and understanding what's rawness over there, what do they have versus what we have, that gap is pretty wide, isn't it? You guys have been disrupting it with all the innovation that's happened. Right. But even then, that gap is pretty different. And that gap doesn't just add a pull or a burden on the one who's going through the change on this side. It's not just a physical gap. Like, it's not just a financial gap or a physical gap. It's a mental gap. Starting with
Sure.
me already writing off saying, I don't fit in there. That's not my world. Oh, badon ka kaam hai. Right? So, but you're talking about a shift which is so inclusive. That's when we will actually thrive, is what you're talking about.
I think we have to jettison. See, change happens only when we decide to unlearn something. For example, and as a society, we learn bad ideas inevitably, right? In food pyramid, we thought that fat is bad, carbs are good. We know that is not true. In MBA world, we learned that these ratios are good and the fundamentals don't have to be worried about. So look, so we have pyramids were built on a sense of afterlife, right? So ideas are powerful because they shape human behavior. This has always been the case. But when you're talking about change, at the bottom, we have to be able to sharply say, what are we jettisoning? What are we giving up? What are we unlearning? Because in the future, learning will be easy. So if I have to overcome a self-limiting belief that I have stumbled into, because of the environment I am in, unlearning that is harder than learning new stuff. Is it not?
Yes.
Right? So the question is that even on a societal basis, we have to unlearn something. I am in the camp that it is very easy to pick what we have to unlearn. Anything that is associated with Hollywood and Bollywood,
Cut it off.
boom, unlearn.
Yeah.
And I think that is hard to do today because their influence, because of social media, is extraordinarily high. But it is a shallow impact that has been created. I think it is possible to unlearn it. And that will happen. And some of that, I think, can happen here relatively quickly. So I think it will need a leader, right? For example, in our whole DPI journey, we don't use any commercial systems, Oracle and this, that. The unlearning had to happen that we'll not use any of that. It's a very easy decision to take. It's an easy decision to communicate. And people, like who have been instrumental in this revolution that has come about, like Sanjay Jain, Pramod Verma, Vivek Raghavan, Lalitesh Katragada, and, so many more, they were able to use their leadership position, which they had earned by their good work, to convey to people that this is right, this is wrong. So in this change that we are talking about, we will need new class of cultural leaders. They will have to come up who will make this distinction clear to people. And I think once they do that, then and then only will this journey start.
One more follow-through question over here. When you think systems today, if you take what we started with this is our world today, this is how our 28-year-old, the median age group, is functioning. If we go the way we are today, without going through the sutras that we talked about, what's it going to look like?
Yeah, I don't know the answer. Honestly, I want to also maintain a ontological humility to keep my mind open and not get fixated on what the answer is. All I can say is that when we have seen even less significant changes, if you go back to the era of horseless carriage and look at the societal narrative at that time, the thinking was that, oh God, these horseless carriages are a great thing because we'll be able to get rid of this horse manure that stinks the road all the time, right? So we almost in that narrative, and I've had a chance to read more about it, there was no real appreciation of what is the change that will actually come, right? It'll lead to suburban living, and it changed the family structure, nuclear families, this, that, and the other. So I haven't yet honestly got my arms around this, and so therefore I want to keep myself in this place of ontological humility and answer your question simply by saying I don't know. But maybe a few years from now I may have a much more developed thought. My I'll only make one comment. I think we are in a fork in the road. The fork in the road is whether we embrace a new definition of humanity or we persist with the old definition of humanity. I think if we persist in the old definition of humanity, there'll be too much of pain. It is like persisting for men to have persisted in their identity of being brawn providers. You know, the ones who stuck to that will have harder change. So we have to figure out what does it mean to be human. And I think what it'll mean to be human will be able to use your values to arrive at judgments that a machine may not be able to do. That's number one. Number two is to be still a creator, not of artifacts, but of tools that create that artifact. And I think so becoming a tool maker will become very important.
A
designer. And the third, and therefore the notion of creativity will change a lot, right? And so therefore performers may not do well, but the people who create new rags and new symphonies may end up doing better, because they may be able to use the new tools to be able to do it in a way that we don't imagine. Third is that we will need to go back to, this is going to reorder the world. There's a beautiful book that I tried to get my daughter to use, and she did actually, and it's a book by Daniel Pink, and it says the whole new world, the whole as in WHO, right?
I've read this.
And he said, look, our society was focused on all these analytical people, engineers, accountants, and so on and so forth. But we need a future world of architects, that know how to keep the building standing, but also the space communicates something to you. So it has both aesthetic and functional things that come together in a collective form, and therefore, you need a whole new mind.
Yeah.
And I would suggest is, just the way he talked about the whole new mind, now what we need are people who will be philosophers at large. And I think our chance here is that you scratch an Indian and you will find a spiritual person inside.
Yeah.
Right? And now the question is, can you turn the spiritual person into a philosopher? I think that gap is relatively small to bridge. And so therefore my optimism. And so therefore we need to become a land of philosophers. Not only few philosophers, who are prominent, but every person is a philosopher of life and is designing therefore his or her own philosophy and therefore his or her own life. I'm cautiously optimistic that we can do that.
I believe this one too. I agree with you. I'm very optimistic, but I'm also very aware of the challenges of this journey.
It's going to be very, very hard. It's going to be very, very hard. But I think if we all get together, we can build the cultural infrastructure that we need to enable that to happen.
So Sharad, today we're seeing, recently there was this report of the top jobs or profiles or jobs only that people aspire to be, and it's mostly YouTubers and influencers, and it's moved from doctor and pilot and teacher and all that to something as frivolous, if I can call it that, as an influencer and a YouTuber. At the risk of really calling it out, we as a country have been honing these skills. Influencers, our gig economy is also, if you actually look at it, it's not much of a skillful thing. We're not tapping into the humanness of that person. We're going into a clockwork sort of thing. Do you see that changing?
I think we are possibly entering a dumbbell kind of an economy, right? Barbell economy, right? There'll be few things in the middle, but there'll be things at the edges. I think if we have to be a meaningful society, then we have to learn to create new value, mostly using R&D, because that's not going to go away. Will that involve a very large proportion of population? No. It'll involve a small proportion of the population. And then we'll need people uh, and however, if you do that well, that will generate wealth in the country. Then the question is, what do we do with people who are not maximizing for wealth, but are maximizing, who are getting some help from the government. In some sense, India already runs a very large program of benefits, as you know, for lots of people, uh, uh, which is some form of universal basic income. Now, the question is, if you are running that, what do you get? Do you get an American inner city, or do you get a, a, a kind of a vibrant Keritsu, or a village where there is flourishing and flowering that is still happening? Uh, if we don't create the first part, which is wealth creation through human labor, is now going to become more difficult. Wealth creation on repetitive work is going to become difficult. Wealth creation on the back of the white collar jobs that we have is going to become much more difficult. So my sense is you have to vacate the middle, and you either go into this side of really pursuing something which is truly going to create meaningful value. It's going to be very hard to do, because it will require scientists and high quality engineers and many other people like that. Or you go into a sense of fulfilling life, which is not optimized necessarily around the rat race that you have today, where you're not seeking material benefits out of life, but you're looking for something deeper. It is very, very corny. It's almost impossible to imagine it today, right? I mean, if you see, in this current environment that we are in, to imagine that we could have a society which is at peace with itself, and yet, we have this kind of a barbell situation, is very difficult to imagine. What will it mean for politics? Because one end of the barbell will decide what's going to happen. What will it mean for crime and punishment? What will it mean for education? What will all of this has to change all over again. So to me, we are exactly at the same point, where it took 400, 500 years to get there, to early 1800s, where all this had to be reimagined. I think we are at the same point all over again. So a new type of thinking and leadership has to emerge. More of the same is not going to work. My own niece, she's just finished her computer science. She lives in the US, and when she entered computer science, it was a hot
It's not changed.
And now when she comes out, companies are announcing, we don't need more software engineers, right?
Develop the core assets.
This is a traumatic development. This is trauma, right? And so what does a now 23, 24-year-old do? And I don't have the answer, frankly. So I think we're going to go through a messy period. But during this messy period, people will have to build their inner muscles to come out of it.
Do you see open source still surviving?
I hope so. Because I think the rate of innovation, you see, there's a theory of innovation, which is that all innovation is combinatorial, which means that what we do is we pick things and we put them together in new ways. But for us to put them together in new ways, you have to have the building blocks in place. Who makes the building blocks? Even in America, because of their large R&D spend, and now China, these building blocks are publicly funded, right? So now the fact that if these building blocks are available for everybody to use, then you can have a lot of combinatorial innovation happening on top. Yeah. If these building blocks are behind a paywall or behind, a partnership that you have to do, and all kinds of constraints are there, then obviously you won't be able to do that. So we need to create a world where small teams can make a big impact. And how will they do that? By being able to do combinatorial innovation at scale, and by doing many experiments as we go forward. And that requires an open innovation system to underpin this at the bottom.
In the context of the conversation we had, like if you have a 27-year-old
Yes.
daughter, I have a 17-year-old. All of them must be, children to somebody who's in their 40s or 50s. When my daughter comes back and says, I want to do something like this, and she's going through that inner self-discovery process, what's the advice for me to be there for her?
My daughter should answer that. But I'll tell you, I do something with her and some of my friends. I write notes which are called into me C. So C inside me.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And why do I do it with my daughter is because I want her, whether she does it with me or not. As I mentioned to you, I think learning how to do it is important. Now sharing this with my daughter is of course safe. She's not, and I'm very privileged to have a group of friends with whom I can do that. But to me, the motivation for this is because I think it's an important part of what we do with our children, right? Because children don't learn by what we tell them; they learn by what we model for them, right? The second is that I think, because as long as we are kind of therefore dealing with our own journey in the right way. So I shouldn't say this because now the secret will be out, but I live for a WhatsApp message back from my daughter saying, I can't believe you're doing this, right? So I live for that, right? And I harvest all those comments that I get like that, because to me, this is success for me, but for somebody who knows me so well, for her to think that I've gone outside my comfort zone and done something that she didn't expect me to do, is for me in my own little way modeling it for her. Wow. I'm honestly, I shouldn't have said this, and maybe you should delete this, but because my secret is out. But the point is that, look, I think with everybody in this world, what we say will matter less. What we model for them will matter more, because we'll be much more visible, much more transparent, right? So I think, this current thing that we have, where you have this Instagram reels about, what is, Instagram versus reality, the contrast is so sharp. All that is temporary in my mind is going to fizzle away over time. And I think people will learn to connect with the real person that they're looking at. And they will look for, in this system, instead of taking inspiration from one person, let's say a Gandhi or Patel, I think we will learn to take inspiration from everybody around us. And this already happens in the tech area. Why the tech work is still so joyful at the high end of the competence scale. Because you know this, because there is this sense that you are learning from each other all the time, right? And I think that thinking has to come to society at large. So instead of learning from a celebrity or somebody, you're learning from people around you. So my sense is, as parents, we have to become modelers for our inner change. And if we can do that by opening up, by learning to converse, by giving them the power to read the label from the outside. Papa, you are a Sheldon, whether you like it or not, right? By sharing with them the difficulty that you're going through, and having, for many things that you're doing, occasional successes, because there will be many failures, and sharing the failures and successes, then I think they'll also copy that from us. Does
Sharad,
that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. You guys have any questions? Did we miss anything?
No, we covered a lot of ground. I can't think of anything.
What does attitude makeover mean to you? It's such an honor to have you So I think I would love to hear this. What
Right.
is attitude?
No, as you said, I think my own mental model is that this is all about the inner OS of the individual,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so when you say that it's not about your skills, it's about your attitude, you're talking about your inner OS.
Yeah.
Up till now, we said, I don't care about your inner OS as long as you can
Give me the outputs.
give me the outputs. Now this world is changing. So I think you are in the center of things. And maybe, in all fairness, I would like to take a rain check from you for coming back maybe 7-8 years from now and reversing this and interviewing you, because I think your journey will lead more insights than my journey will in the next few years, because you happen to be in the part of this whole story, which is, I think, going to become more and more meaningful over time.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, it's a very joyful place to be in. It's a difficult place. It's not going to be easy. And you'll have lots of failures, valleys of death along the way. But remain cautiously optimistic. I think you're in the best place in the world to make this happen.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
much.
Yeah.